Stand up. I mean it. Stand up right now. Put your hands over your head. Reach as high as you can. Now imagine you are grabbing a bar up there, and you lift your feet off the floor, and your whole body is just hanging. Feel that. Feel the pull through your shoulders, through your spine, through your wrists. Feel the spaces between your vertebrae opening up, one by one, like someone unscrewing a clamp. That sensation you are imagining, that is probably the most important thing your body has not done today. And what I want to show you is why. See, here is the situation. You have got this column inside you, your spine, and most people think of it as one piece. It is not. It is 24 separate bones stacked on top of each other, and between every pair of bones there is a disc. 23 of them. Now, each disc is a beautiful piece of engineering, and I want you to appreciate just how beautiful it is before I explain how we are wrecking it. On the outside, you have these concentric rings of fibrous cartilage, the annulus fibrosus, arranged at alternating angles like the plies in a radial tire. That alternating angle is not an accident. It means the rings can resist force coming from multiple directions, not just one. And on the inside, held under pressure by those rings, is a gel, the nucleus pulposus. It is about 80% water. When the disc is healthy, that gel behaves like a fluid. You push down on it from above, and the pressure distributes equally in all directions. That is Pascal's principle. Same physics that makes your car's brake system work. The pedal pushes fluid in one direction, and the force transmits uniformly through the system. Your disc does the same thing. That is how your spine can carry the weight of your whole torso, your head, your arms, whatever you are holding, without any single point on the disc wall taking the full load. It is hydraulic engineering. Nature figured it out a long time before we did. Now here is where it gets interesting. The lower lumbar discs, between L3 and L4, between L4 and L5, those are sitting right above your pelvis. About 60% of your total body weight passes through them every second you are standing upright. They are the load-bearing foundation of the entire column. And when you sit, you would think the load would decrease, right? You are resting. You are off your feet. Your muscles are relaxed. You would be wrong. A fellow named Alf Nachemsen at the University of Gothenburg did something rather extraordinary in the 1960s. He took pressure transducers, needle-mounted sensors, and he put them directly inside the nucleus pulposus of living human subjects. He measured the actual pressure on the disc in different body positions. And what he published in Acta Orthopaedica Scandinavica surprised everyone. Unsupported sitting increased the compressive load on the lumbar discs by about 40% compared to standing. Leaning forward while seated more than doubled it. And that position you hold when you hunch toward your computer screen with a slight twist, which is most of the time if you are honest about it, that increased the load by 400%. 4 times the standing pressure, while you think you are resting. Hans-Joachim Wilke at the University of Ulm refined this work in 1999. He implanted a fiber optic sensor, 1.5 millimeters in diameter, into the L4-L5 disc of a volunteer and tracked the pressure continuously over 24 hours. Published it in Spine. He found some of Nachemsen's specific ratios were a little off. The sitting to standing comparison was closer than originally reported, but the fundamental point stood. Sitting is not a neutral position. It is a loaded position. Your spine does not know that you are relaxing. It only knows the force. And here is the problem. The average American adult sits for 9.5 hours a day. That is not my guess. That is measured with accelerometers strapped to actual people. 9.5 hours of continuous compressive loading on a hydraulic system that was not designed for it. Now, why does this matter so much? Because of how these discs eat. And I use that word deliberately. Your intervertebral discs have no blood supply. None. They are the largest structures in your body with no blood vessels running through them. Think about that for a second. Every other tissue in your body gets its nutrition delivered by the bloodstream. Your discs do not. The nucleus pulposus gets its oxygen and its glucose through a process called imbibition. When you take the compressive load off the disc, fluid seeps in from the vertebral end plates above and below, carrying nutrients with it. When you put the load back on, fluid squeezes out, carrying waste products away. It is a pump. Compression pushes fluid out, decompression pulls fluid in. And the only energy source for this pump is the alternation between loaded and unloaded states. You move, you compress, you decompress. The disc feeds itself. When you sit for 9.5 hours without meaningful interruption, the pump runs one way. Fluid leaves. Fluid does not come back. The gel dehydrates. The disc gets thinner. The vertebrae above and below creep closer together. The little bony windows where the spinal nerves exit, the intervertebral foramina, they narrow. Compressed nerves produce pain, tingling, numbness that radiates down through the legs. You are physically shorter at the end of the day than you were when you woke up, by as much as 1.5 to 2 centimeters across the full column, mostly in the lumbar region. You get most of it back overnight while you sleep, and the spine is unloaded in a horizontal position. That is why you are tallest first thing in the morning. But here is the catch. The recovery is never quite complete, and it gets worse with time. The nucleus pulposus progressively loses water content as you age. What was 80% water at 20 is closer to 70% at 50. The gel becomes more fibrous, less compliant, less able to distribute force evenly. The annulus develops small radial tears from repeated cycles of asymmetric loading. The disc thins permanently. The vertebral bodies grow bony spurs, osteophytes, as the skeleton tries to stabilize a joint that has lost its hydraulic cushion. Magnetic resonance imaging shows disc degeneration in 36% of people who have no back pain at all. The damage is present long before you feel it. And here is the key point. The daily compression without decompression cycle of prolonged sitting accelerates this entire trajectory from slow age-related decline to premature structural failure. But here is what really got me interested. The damage does not stay in the spine. It propagates downward through the pelvis. See, when you sit in a chair, your hips are locked at about 90 degrees. And there is a muscle, the psoas major, that runs from the transverse processes of your lumbar vertebrae, threads through the pelvis, and attaches to the top of the femur. It is the only muscle in your body that directly connects the upper skeleton to the lower skeleton. When you sit, this muscle is held in a shortened position for hours. And muscles, when they are kept short for long enough, they adapt, not temporarily, structurally. The sarcomere, which is the fundamental contractile unit inside the muscle fiber, responds to chronic shortening by reducing the number of units arranged in series. The muscle literally gets shorter at the cellular level. It remodels itself to fit the position you hold most often. This is the same thing Robert Chisapo and his colleagues at the University of Vienna showed happens to the calf muscles of women who wear high-heeled shoes every day. Shorter fascicle lengths, reduced ankle range of motion. Chronic positional shortening changes muscle architecture. The psoas, held at 90 degrees for 9.5 hours a day year after year, undergoes the same remodeling. Now a shortened psoas tilts the pelvis forward. And a forward-tilted pelvis does two things simultaneously. It increases the curve of the lower spine, which puts even more compressive load on the already dehydrated discs. And it stretches the muscles on the backside of the hip, the gluteus maximus and gluteus medius, into a lengthened position from which they cannot generate force efficiently. Their neural drive decreases. Stuart McGill at the University of Waterloo, who is probably the most cited spine biomechanics researcher alive, called this gluteal amnesia. The name is a bit playful. The mechanism is not. In 2013, Sean Freeman, Angela Massia, and Stuart McGill published a study in Clinical Biomechanics where they measured glute activation, then induced acute hip joint pain with a capsular distension arthrogram, then retested. The gluteal activation on the painful side dropped significantly. The brain was suppressing the motor signal. They called it arthrogenic neuromuscular inhibition. Pain was one trigger, but chronic postural adaptation, the kind that comes from sitting all day every day, produces the same suppression over time. Mills and colleagues at the University of Salford confirmed the downstream effect. People with restricted hip flexor length showed significantly reduced gluteus maximus activation during a squat. The short hip flexors were not just tight. They were actively suppressing the opposing muscles through reciprocal inhibition. The strongest muscles in the hip, the ones that propel you forward when you walk, that stabilize your pelvis when you stand on one leg, that absorb impact when you run, were being turned down like a dial. Now think about this person. 58 years old, has sat at a desk since the age of 28, drives 40 minutes to work in a bucket seat that holds the hips at exactly the angle they have been locked in all day, sits from 7 in the morning until 5, drives home in the same bucket seat, sits on the couch from 7 until 10, does this 50 weeks a year for 30 years. Their psoas has remodeled at the sarcomere level. Their glutes are not firing properly. Their discs are chronically thin and dehydrated. Their intervertebral foramina have narrowed. They wake up stiff every morning and they say, well, that is what happens when you get older. But it is not age doing this. It is the accumulated mechanical consequence of one posture held for far too long, without the opposing posture ever being applied. And the thing is, there was never a single moment of injury. No pop, no snap, no herniation event, no dramatic failure. The damage accumulated invisibly over 3 decades, like compound interest on a loan nobody disclosed. Every day a tiny withdrawal from the spinal account, the hip account, the shoulder account, the grip account. And nobody ever made a deposit. And the cascade keeps going. It reaches the shoulders. This is where the story takes a turn that I find genuinely satisfying, because the solution comes from thinking about the problem the right way. When you sit at a desk, your arms are held in front of you, your shoulders round forward. Your scapulae, the shoulder blades, drift apart and tilt forward. The muscles in the front of the shoulder, the pectoralis minor and the subscapularis, shorten because they are held in a shortened position, just like the psoas. The muscles in the back, the lower trapezius and the infraspinatus, lengthen and weaken because they are held in a stretched position. Over months and years, this postural shift becomes structural in the same way the psoas shortening becomes structural. The tissue remodels. Now at the top of the shoulder blade there is a bony shelf called the acromion. Between that shelf and the top of the upper arm bone, the head of the humerus, there is a space, the subacromial space. A tendon runs through it, the supraspinatus, which is part of the rotator cuff. When the shoulder rounds forward from desk posture, the coracoacromial arch descends, and that space narrows. Every time you try to raise your arm, the tendon gets pinched between the acromion above and the humeral head below. That pinching is subacromial impingement syndrome. It is the most common shoulder diagnosis in orthopedic practice worldwide. And the thing is, most of the time it is not caused by an injury. It is caused by the postural shift that comes from sitting with your arms in front of you for years. Now here is where this story takes a turn that I find delightful. An orthopedic surgeon named John Kirsch, who practiced in Stevens Point, Wisconsin for 33 years, was hiking with his 2 young sons in Door County in 1983. They came to one of those horizontal ladder setups, the kind you find in parks. His boys grabbed the overhead rungs and swung across like chimpanzees. Kirsch tried to reach up. He could not get to the second rung. Both shoulders had impingement from years of holding his arms in a fixed position during arthroscopic knee surgeries. So he went home and started hanging from a bar. Just hanging, dead weight, no exercise, no movement, just letting gravity pull his body downward while his hands held the bar. Within days, the pain decreased. Within 3 months, gone. Now, most people would have shrugged and moved on. Kirsch did not. He was a surgeon. He wanted to understand the physics. He spent the next 28 years studying what that position was doing to the shoulder joint. In 2004, He performed computed tomography scans on living subjects with their arms in the overhead hanging position, and he found a structure that had never been formally described in the orthopedic literature. When body weight pulls downward with the arms overhead, the head of the humerus presses upward into the underside of the acromion, and that contact bends the coracoacromial arch, stretches the coracoacromial ligament, and mechanically opens the subacromial space. The tendon that was being pinched now has room. The impingement resolves as a direct consequence of the geometry of the position. Kirsch named this contact point the acromiohumeral joint. He then took 92 patients, all diagnosed with impingement or rotator cuff problems, many slated for surgery, and gave them a hanging protocol. 90 of them returned to normal daily activities. 2 dropped out. He argued that regular hanging could permanently remodel the acromion through Wolff's law, which says bone deposits new matrix along the vectors of applied mechanical stress. Same principle the orthodontist uses to move your teeth. Apply consistent force. The structure changes. So now look at what happens when you put all 4 systems together. This is where the elegance of the thing becomes apparent. You grip a bar. You let your feet leave the ground. Your body weight pulls downward through the spinal column. The compressive load that has been squeezing your discs all day reverses. The vertebrae separate. Fluid is drawn back into the nucleus pulposus through imbibition, the same process that happens when you sleep, except now you are actively creating negative pressure in the disc space. The intervertebral foramina widen. Compressed nerves get room. The pump that has been running in one direction for 9.5 hours finally runs in reverse. Every second of hanging is a second of decompression that the spine has been denied since you sat down this morning. Simultaneously, the overhead position pulls the psoas into full lengthening. Your arms are overhead. Your spine is extended or neutral. Your hips are in neutral or slight extension under the pull of gravity. The shortened hip flexors, remodeled at the sarcomere level from years of 90-degree flexion, are stretched through their complete available range. And this is not a gentle static stretch. Body weight provides a traction force that exceeds what most stretching protocols can deliver. Over weeks of consistent hanging, the muscle begins to add sarcomeres back in series. The fascicle length increases. The pelvis drifts back toward neutral. As the tilt reverses, the gluteal muscles return to a length from which they can generate force effectively. The reciprocal inhibition that was suppressing them eases. Neural drive to the gluteus maximus increases. At the same time, the humerus presses into the acromion. The coracoacromial arch opens. The impinged tendon is freed. If the hanging is maintained regularly, Wolff's law predicts the acromion may permanently remodel. And the whole time, every second you are up there, your forearm flexors are contracting at maximal sustained output to hold your body weight against gravity. This is not 4 separate interventions done in parallel. It is one position, one mechanical event, that propagates its correction through 4 interconnected systems, because the damage in those systems came from one mechanical event held in the opposite direction. The spine was compressed, so you decompress it. The hips were folded, so you extend them. The shoulders were protracted, so you retract and elevate them. The hands were empty, so you load them. Gravity was the destructive force when you sat. Gravity is the corrective force when you hang. Same force, different vector. Which brings me to the 5th system, and this is the part that genuinely startled me. There is a 5th system that has nothing to do with anatomy and everything to do with how long you are going to be alive. Darrell Leong and his colleagues at McMaster University in Hamilton published a study in The Lancet in 2015. The PURE study. 142,861 participants across 17 countries. They measured grip strength with a handheld dynamometer and followed people for a median of 4 years. Every 5-kilogram drop in grip strength was associated with a 16% increase in all-cause mortality, 17% increase in cardiovascular death, 7% increase in heart attack, 9% increase in stroke, Grip strength was a stronger predictor of death than systolic blood pressure. Now stop and think about that for a second. Blood pressure is the number your cardiologist monitors at every single visit. It is the basis for medication decisions, for lifestyle recommendations, for risk stratification in clinical cardiology. Every doctor's office in the world has a blood pressure cuff. And what Leong's data showed is that the force your hand can generate around a simple spring-loaded dynamometer predicted how long you would live more accurately than that cuff reading. Across 17 countries, across all income levels, across both sexes. After adjusting for physical activity, smoking, drinking, education, employment, and age, the association still held. Avan Ihi Sayer at the University of Southampton and Thomas Kirkwood at Newcastle University wrote a commentary in The Lancet in response to this study, asking whether grip strength might function as a biomarker of biological aging itself. Not a cause of longevity, a readout of it. A single measurement that captures the overall integrity of the neuromuscular system, the vascular system, and the metabolic reserve that determines how long the organism endures. If they are right, grip is not just a measure of your forearm, it is a measure of you. And hanging is the hardest grip training most people will ever encounter. A 70-kilogram person hanging from a bar puts 70 kilograms of sustained isometric force through the fingers, the wrist flexors, the brachioradialis, the flexor digitorum profundus, the flexor pollicis longus. No grip training device replicates that load. No hand exerciser comes close. The bar, body weight, gravity, and time. That is the entire equipment list. Now I have to be honest with you about what we know and what we do not know. This is important. I am not going to oversell this. The intradiscal pressure data from Nachemson and Wilkie is rock solid. Direct in vivo measurements, calibrated transducers, replicated across decades by multiple independent groups. That sitting loads the spine more than standing is one of the most established findings in the entire field of biomechanics. I am very confident in that claim. The hip flexor shortening model is physiologically sound and is consistent with the high heel calf data from SAPO and with what we understand about sarcomere adaptation to chronic positional change. But here is the gap. Nobody has done a controlled trial specifically showing that hanging reverses psoas sarcomere remodeling in chronic sitters. The mechanism is plausible. The specific interventional evidence for hanging as the delivery system is missing. It might work. The physics says it should work. But the trial has not been done. McGill's gluteal amnesia is well supported by the 2013 arthrogenic inhibition study and the Mills data showing that restricted hip flexors correlate with reduced gluteal activation. The phenomenon is real. People who sit all day have measurably less glute recruitment. But whether hanging specifically is better than targeted glute exercises, or stretching protocols, or simply walking more, at reversing this inhibition has not been tested in a controlled head-to-head comparison. We are extrapolating from the physics. The physics makes sense. The comparison data does not exist. Kirsch's shoulder work is the most clinically striking and the weakest in terms of formal validation. 90 out of 92 patients returning to normal function is a number that demands attention. But his work was not published in a peer-reviewed journal. There was no control group, no randomization, no blinding. The sample is modest. The bone remodeling claim is consistent with Wolff's law, but Wolff's law is a general principle, not a guaranteed result for every specific intervention at every dose. Other orthopedic surgeons are skeptical. I would call this preliminary evidence that warrants rigorous study, not a proven protocol. The pure grip data is among the strongest associations in all of epidemiology. Nearly 140,000 people, 17 countries published in The Lancet with thorough statistical controls. The link between grip strength and mortality is about as well established as these things get. But we do not know whether deliberately improving grip strength through hanging reduces your risk of dying. The grip might be a window into overall physiological integrity rather than a lever you can pull. It might be a thermometer, not a thermostat. Good. Now, with that honest accounting in place, consider what happened when these mechanisms entered the marketplace. Non-surgical spinal decompression therapy uses a motorized table, often called the DRX 9000 or something similar, costing $80,000 to $125,000 for the machine alone to apply traction to the lumbar spine. The machine pulls the pelvis and the thorax in opposite directions, creating negative intradiscal pressure. The goal is exactly the same physics as hanging. Separate the vertebrae, rehydrate the disc, decompress the nerve. A session runs $100 to $200. 20 to 30 sessions over 6 to 8 weeks. $3,000 to $6,000 out of pocket, because most insurance plans will not cover it. Now think about what I just said. The physics is identical. Longitudinal traction reducing compressive load. Imbibition pulling fluid back into the nucleus pulposus. The machine does it with a calibrated, computer-controlled force that adjusts 13 times per second. Hanging does it with the crude, unmodulated pull of your own body weight. But the fundamental physical event, a pulling force separating compressed vertebral segments to allow fluid re-entry, is the same event. The machine is more precise, but the event is the same. Arthroscopic acromioplasty, the surgery designed to treat subacromial impingement, involves inserting a camera and a motorized burr through small incisions in the shoulder and physically shaving bone from the underside of the acromion to widen the space. The surgeon manually does what Kirsch says hanging does through Wolff's Law. The average cost at an ambulatory surgery center runs $6,000 to $9,000. And Pavola and colleagues published a randomized controlled trial in the British Medical Journal in 2018, a proper trial with blinding and a sham surgery control, and they found that arthroscopic acromioplasty did not produce better 2-year outcomes than diagnostic arthroscopy or exercise therapy alone. The surgery that costs thousands and carries the risks of anesthesia, infection, nerve damage, and prolonged rehabilitation did not beat exercise in a rigorous head-to-head comparison. A door-frame pull-up bar costs less than $30. Now I should be clear about the limitations. The dose matters. The clinical decompression machine ramps the force gradually and cycles between tension and partial release. A dead hang applies your full body weight the instant your feet leave the ground, and the spine reloads abruptly when you let go. For someone with an acute disc herniation, that rapid pressure change could aggravate the injury. For someone with a severely compromised shoulder or very weak grip, a full dead hang is not accessible. Partial hanging, feet still on the ground, arms bearing only a portion of your weight, reduces the force and the risk. The clinical machines exist because some patients need that graduated control. But the markup exists because someone took a free human movement, the most basic movement our species performed for millions of years, put it inside a branded device in a rented office, staffed it, insured it, marketed it, and passed the overhead along to the patient. The physics did not become more sophisticated. It became more expensive. Here is what I find most beautiful about this. We are the fifth great ape: gorillas, chimpanzees, orangutans, gibbons, and us. All of the other four still hang. All of them still brachiate, which means they swing through the canopy using their arms. We came down from the trees roughly 3 million years ago, and we kept every feature of the brachiating primate. The ball and socket shoulder joint, the mobile scapula, the long clavicle, the ratio of arm length to torso, all of it optimized for overhead suspension and locomotion through branches. For most of those 3 million years, the mismatch did not matter. Daily life required overhead reaching, climbing, pulling, lifting loads above the head, carrying things. The shoulder moved through its full range of motion because survival demanded it. The spine cycled between compression and decompression through the variety of upright movement. The grip held body weight against branches and tools and loads. The office chair is about 150 years old. The personal computer, about 40. The smartphone, about 18. In terms of the evolutionary clock, these are not even a tick. We took a body that was engineered from the ground up for overhead suspension, and we locked it in a seated, forward-flexed, internally rotated position for 9.5 hours a day. The shoulder that evolved to reach overhead now reaches forward to a keyboard. The spine that evolved to cycle between loaded and unloaded holds one loaded position without variation. The hip that evolved to extend through its full range with every stride stays folded at 90 degrees from dawn to dusk. The grip that evolved to hold 70 kilograms of body weight against a branch holds the negligible weight of a plastic mouse. And then we act surprised when it all breaks down. One position reverses every single one of those modern failures simultaneously, and the position is the one our body was designed to hold in the first place. Think about the retired teacher, 67 years old, shoulders ache reaching for the cabinet above the stove, lower back stiffens after 20 minutes in the car. One doctor recommends arthroscopic decompression for the right shoulder, $7,000 plus rehab. Another recommends a course of machine spinal decompression for the lower back, 20 sessions at $150, $3,000 total, $10,000 in total. Neither physician mentioned hanging. Neither asked whether the patient owned a door frame. The combined bill would buy 333 pull-up bars. The patient needs one. Your grandmother, when things were hard, when the world was pressing down on you and you told her you were struggling, she looked you in the eye and she said 3 words. Hang in there. She did not know about intradiscal pressure. She did not know about sarcomere remodeling or arthrogenic neuromuscular inhibition. She did not know about the acromiohumeral joint or Wolff's law. But she came from a generation of bodies that still climbed and reached and hung and pulled. And she knew, in the way that old wisdom knows things before science catches up, that a body pressed down all day needs to be pulled upward to come right again. That was not a metaphor. It was a biomechanical prescription delivered in the only language she had. Find a bar, door frame, playground, tree branch, anything overhead that can hold your weight. Grip it with both hands, shoulder width apart. Let your body weight pull downward. If you cannot hold your full weight, keep your feet on the ground and bend your knees until your arms bare as much as you can tolerate. Start with 10 seconds if that is all your grip allows. Build to 30. Build to 60. A few minutes a day, accumulated in sets of whatever your hands can hold. Do it between meetings. Do it when you wake up. Do it before bed. Do it when you feel the stiffness creeping into your lower back after hours in a chair. Your discs rehydrate. Your hip flexors lengthen. Your shoulders open. Your grip strengthens. 4 systems. 1 position. No machine. No appointment. No bill. No waiting room. Just a bar, your body weight, and the same gravity that was damaging you all day, now working in the other direction. Hang in there. That was never a metaphor. That was a prescription. Now, here is what I want from you. If you tried hanging, even for 10 seconds after watching this, tell me what you felt. What changed? I am genuinely curious.